we all in attendance? It looks as though we are. So today is April 27th, 2020. Tonight is the meeting of the Board of Selectmen pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the governor's March 15th order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted at this meeting. This meeting will be held accessible to the public via the Zoom online option. So I will just call a roll call for members in attendance. Dan Spencer, Chairman. Michael Connor.
Here.
Don Martinez.
Here.
Cynthia McNulty. Bob Biaggi.
Here.
Right. Also joining us is our Town Administrator Dennis Frayne, our CFO Mary McKinnon, our Selectman Administrative Assistant Hillary Ali, and other special guests that we will hear from later on. First on our agenda, CFO Mary McKinnon to talk about the review and approval of our band notes. Mary?
All right. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for getting together to take care of this piece of business. We had talked before about the upcoming band sale. So a band is a bond anticipation note, which is short-term debt that the town has issued. We currently have outstanding $5,655,000 worth of short-term notes. Those notes were renewed and a new piece was issued last year in June. They were scheduled to mature in June of this year. So we were originally scheduled to conduct this renewal in June. However, given the volatility in the market due to the COVID-19 pandemic, in consultation with our financial advisors, they had recommended that we go out to market sooner. Given that most municipalities have their debt mature at the end of the fiscal year, they felt that we would have a better option in the market if we went out sooner, rather than trying to compete against a flurry of other municipalities in June. So that's what we did. We had a debt sale that took place last week on April 22nd. And I have forwarded out to all of you prior to this meeting all of the documents and results of this band sale. And I'll just draw your attention to the results. There's a chart that was provided to you indicating that we did have two bidders on this particular debt sale. They were Piper Sandler and Oppenheimer. If we contrast this with our debt sale of last year at this time, there were 6 qualified bidders who bid for the town's debt. This time around, there were 2. What we did see is an improvement in the coupon rate, which is the rate of interest that we pay, as well as the net interest cost. So what you have in front of you is that the winning bidder was Piper Sandler and Company, with a coupon rate of 2% on $5,655,000 worth of short-term debt, with an average net interest cost of 1.2%. So what we need to do tonight is for the board to make a motion that encompasses a couple of different things. Number one, it approves and executes the documents for the bond anticipation notes, as well as reaffirms the board's authority to do so. Once you guys have taken that action, if you guys can you see the packet that I'm holding up in front of my camera?
Yes.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we will need to have wet signatures on these documents from a majority of the Board of Selectmen, as well as from our town treasurer. And a number of these documents need to be notarized by our town clerk, who is also joining us here this evening to record the official vote. So once we finish up here tonight, we'll need you guys to come in and sign these documents. I will leave this packet in the lower level conference room. And this is just the signature pages. So on every single page, you'll see a notation of where you need to sign. So before we take the motion, does anybody have any questions regarding this?
Should the motion pass, Mary, when do we need to sign that by?
Ideally by tomorrow. They do like to get the documents back in a fairly timely manner. I'd like to be able to get them back in the mail via FedEx on Wednesday at some point, if that works for everybody.
I can be in tomorrow, Mary.
Fine by me.
Excellent. Excellent, thank
All
you.
right.
And I presume, Larry, you're on here, right? Will you be in tomorrow in order to be able to seal these?
Yeah, I'm here,
Excellent, thank you.
and I will be there tomorrow.
Great, thank you.
All right, so any further questions or comments with regards to the ban notes? Hearing none, my laptop froze up, so I don't have the motion in front of me. So if someone has the motion that Mary had emailed out, if they'd like to make a motion, I would be glad to entertain one at this point.
I don't see mine either.
All right, actually, my computer just came back, so here's the motion that I'd be looking for. A motion to approve the sale of $5.655 million in bond anticipation notes, as well as approving and adopting the preliminary and official statements, and executing a significant events disclosure statement in conjunction with this sale, and to direct the treasurer to follow procedures to maintain tax-exempt statuses of these notes. Further, that the Board of Selectmen, Town Clerk, and Town Treasurer are authorized to take any and all such actions to carry out these votes and execute the associated documents.
So moved.
We have a first by Mr. Martinez. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second, Mr. Biaggi. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 0. Thank you very much, Mary. Appreciate all the hard work.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is Town Administrator Report. Dennis?
Thanks, Dan. Just a quick summary. All's been going extremely well at the morning meetings. I know you've been attending them. I think we're getting a good interaction with the public, but most importantly, all the department heads and emergency management directors have been able to stay in touch, and Mark's done a great job with that, and Jim and Karen have been orchestrating the Zoom magnificently, and all has been going as smoothly as you could possibly expect it to go. Did have a conversation this afternoon with Senator Fatman and Representative Soter on what next year's budget looks like. I think Mary touched on what this year's budget looks like last week, or I know she brought it up during one of our 9 a.m. meetings. It looks like the state's going to be able to keep us whole for the current year. Next year is a different story as to what we're going to be looking at, but we're really not going to know. At the earliest, we're going to know sometime in late June, and of course our town meeting's in late June. One of the things that Senator Fatman was suggesting today is the state may very well open up on a 1/12 budget meeting. They'll authorize 1/12 of what they authorized this year, and possibly on a 1/4 budget, which would mean the first quarter represents a quarter of this year's budget before they finalize anything, which is somewhat difficult because if there are going to be significant cuts in Chapter 70 or in local aid, we like to know as soon as possible so we can make adjustments to the budget before we start spending in July. So more to come on that. Finance Committee is holding their hearings. They had their first one on the new format last week. They're going to meet again next Tuesday. Board of Health, of course, has been meeting right along, and all's been good on that front. Town offices have been open. I know you get your updates from Tim Accardi, but Inspectional Services has been extremely busy, almost as busy as ever. We did have, as you know, two employees in the fire department that did test positive for the virus, and they are quarantined. Fortunately, I know the deputy chief is on. No other individuals tested positive, so that was good news, and that is information that we can share publicly. I know this is a public meeting. We did confirm that this morning, that we can discuss without discussing names, but we can indicate departments that are impacted. So as of right now, the fire chief is keeping it together. I know he's had, along with the deputy fire chief, everyone in the department, the plaintiffs have everyone in the department tested. I think they've done half of them so far. So that's going fairly well.
Dennis, I have a question for Mark. Hey, Mark, what is the protocol now that they've tested positive? Do they need to test negative 1 or 2 times before they can come back to work? What's the protocol?
Myself and the chief spoke with Esther today in regards to that. There are a couple options that we can take. We'll probably have them tested. They need to show no signs and symptoms for at least 7 days without medication. So they can't take Tylenol for their fever. It has to break on its own, and then they have to wait 3 to 7 days. And we're probably going to end up having them tested as well. And then they can come back.
I would think that would be the prudent thing, because not that they want to provide us misinformation, but you could forget if you took Tylenol in the middle of the night if you had a fever or something. So personally, I think, and hopefully people agree with me, that we should at least have them tested once, if not twice, to make sure that they're clear to come back. Being first responders, so I don't know, it's not our decision, but I'm just saying how I feel.
Yeah, we're definitely going to follow the advice from Esther. She's been tremendous through this whole ordeal, and we'll take her advice and move forward. We definitely want to make sure that they're symptom free before they come back. That's for sure.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
Just, Don, to follow up along that same line, we did have one DPW employee, as you know, that tested positive in mid-March, and that was the protocol, to have him 2 negative tests.
That's great.
And he's due to return this week, actually. So it was a long haul, but
yeah, it does stink. There's no question about it. And I'm not want to put them in, quarantine any longer than they need to be, but we have to keep all of our people safe too. So thank you.
Yeah, there's been no shyness of testing. That's a good thing.
And if I can just give a shout out to Bellingham Urgent Care up on Pulaski, up on Rentham Street. They've been great. They've been working with me through this whole process. We go in and we asked for all employees in the town to be tested. It wasn't just fire, it was fire, police, DPW. We had a lot of people go in and get tested, and they were more than accommodating for us. So I want to applaud them too. They've been doing a great job and continue to do a great job for us.
Awesome.
Absolutely. And the other thing we mentioned this morning at the 10 o'clock meeting was, because there were 2 firefighters that did test positive, just stressing to the public again, cooperate with what the standard protocol is now. When the firefighters show up, they have one going in, and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, he just has a surgical mask on, he knocks on the door, he goes in to evaluate, or he or she goes in to evaluate the patient, and depending on what they see in there, they come back out and don the appropriate PPE. So as long as we can get the residents to make sure that they're cooperating, not gather, and let the first responders do their job. That's key.
Well put, Dan.
Thank you. Yeah, I do listen to you every now and then, Mark. All right. Anything else, Dennis, as far as town administrator report?
Thanks to all the board members for coming in. I know we joke about having an audience of 10 or 12 in the morning, but I can tell you it's a lot more than that, because we're getting a lot of emails in. A lot of them are just expressing their appreciation for the updates, daily updates, even though some of those meetings only go 10 or 12 minutes. I think we're getting the information out, which is the intent all along, to not let people be getting their information off of social media. So thank you.
Not getting the info from the Book of Faces, right, Mark?
That's right. That's right. And if anybody knows of a town business or someone that wants to be a special guest on the show, I think it's important to keep that going, because we want to get everybody out there some recognition. So during this tough time.
Absolutely. Cynthia, you are our booking agent. Get on that. All right. Do we have any old business? All right. I'm going to start off with some new business, and I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Spasato for some new business. So Larry, let's talk about elections.
Good evening. Thank you. I just wanted to sort of bring everyone up to date on where we stand right now in terms of elections for the rest of the year. We do have 3 elections remaining, the municipal election, the September primary, and the general election in November. And in terms of what I'm going to talk about tonight is strictly regarding the municipal election, because that's the only one where we have any firm guidelines on what we can and cannot do. I've gotten a lot of inquiries, and you probably have as well, from residents that are asking if we can mail out ballots. And some people have suggested that we mail out ballots to every registered voter. That's not going to happen for a number of reasons. The primary one is that it's illegal. They have not changed the law regarding that. So it's illegal to send out ballots to people that have not solicited them. And besides the fact, from a financial point of view, it would be prohibitively expensive to do because there's much more work involved, people's time, and also there's a lot more. We get more ballots, which for municipal elections we do pay for, and also the postage would just be astronomical. But the good thing is that it's not legal, so we don't even have to consider it. As you all know, Chapter 45 of the Acts of 2020 allowed for us to change the date of the election, and also it allows us to change the hours for which we hold the election. So we did change the date. You guys signed off on that a while back. The new date is June 9th. And what I wanted to talk about today is before we actually post the warrant, we have to say what times we are going to be operating. People are going to have 3 different options in terms of voting in this election. 2 of them are extremely similar. It's really just semantics, but it would be absentee voting and early voting by mail. And in terms of absentee voting, the one thing that has changed is that there does not have to be a reason. In the past, people were supposed to give a reason, such as they were going to be out of town or they were in the hospital or whatever. To be honest, no towns really paid attention to that because it's very difficult to check to see if that was truly the case. We can't go checking to see if they're really home or not. So while there's technically a change to the law, there's not going to really be a change procedurally. Early voting by mail is really the same exact process. People send in an application and then we send a ballot out to them the same way as absentee voting. The difference there from a technical point of view is that there was never any reason required and doesn't have to be. And then, of course, the third is that they will be going to a polling place. The Acts of 2020 do not preclude or eliminate the need for a polling place. So regardless, we have to have a polling place. And we're going to obviously use the gym. We're all set. We don't need to change that. The positive thing about that is school is not in session. So there's one silver lining to that. So we're not going to have any issues with any any conflicts with scheduling and being able to use the gym. So getting back to what I wanted to talk to you about tonight is basically the hours in which we're going to be voting. The state has actually brought down the number of hours to 4. However, our charter allows a minimum of 8 hours. So what I'm actually proposing is that we lessen the time on this upcoming election, and that it be 8 hours. We're not allowed to start any later than noon, so it would be noon until 8 p.m. And in that way, we can minimize the number of time that people are together in the polling place in terms of the poll workers. And also, we would require fewer poll workers. And that's important this year because there's a lot of poll workers. As we know, most poll workers fit into the high-risk group in terms of age, and some of them are have expressed some reluctance to even work at the polls this time around. So it would allow us to work with less poll workers, and it would also allow us to have less cost in the in police detail, which is one of the major costs for our elections. So it will eliminate the 5 hours in the morning that we would have to pay police detail. I'm also going to try to minimize the number of policemen that we have to have available, because we do have a little bit of leeway in that regard this time around. I'm sure that, as we all know, unfortunately, our local elections are usually very poorly attended. This year, it's sort of as luck would have it, we have the Prop 2.5, so the people might come out more to vote for that particular issue. But I think that if people are committed either way, either in support of the 3.5 or against it, they will kind of make it their business to vote. And therefore,
we're only going 2.5. We're not going 3 this year.
what'd you say?
I said we're only going 2.5, not 3.5.
Oh, okay. Did I say 3.5?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I saw Mary smile. So.
I'm sorry. So I think though, if people are really, if it's important to them, they will make it their business to vote one of the 3 ways that I just described. So I don't think it's going to cut down on the number of people voting or make a change in how they're voting or anything like that. And I would also go further and to say that without the 2.5, our response would probably be less than even last year, because with the COVID-19, that might prohibit some people from voting at all, even though they have other options. But I think if this works out, we should keep our local elections to 8 hours all the time, because it's kind of wasteful in many ways to sit there for 13 hours for 200 or 300 people to come through. So I think we should keep that in mind. If this works out, we might want to continue to do that, because that's the minimum that our charter allows.
So Larry, I'm sorry, go ahead. All right, I'll go. As far as the poll workers go, now there's no, when they commit to being a poll worker, they're there for the entire time, right?
Correct. We don't have any half times.
Right. So you're looking at poll workers that have to commit to a 13-hour shift, essentially.
Correct.
And you bring in food for them, but for the most part, they're sitting there the whole time, right?
And that's 13 hours on site. They also have to come to town hall in the morning to pick up all their equipment and so on. And then, of course, there's at least the warden stay for the vote count after the election.
All right. And then the other question I'm going to ask you, although I've asked you personally, I'm going to ask because I'm sure some of my colleagues might have the same question. Why can't we do a split shift from 8 to 12 and then 4 to 8?
From
economically speaking.
We can. The issue with that, I mean, there's no law that prohibits that. The issue that I have found, because I proposed that to them and at the last election, because that was my first time around. And actually, it was the wardens that had an issue with it. The reason being is that you'd have to do 2 reconciliations. Instead of doing 1 at the end of the night, you'd have to do 2, because before the first shift left, you'd have to make sure everything balanced. And then the thing that they did not like about that was if they discovered later on that there was an issue in the morning that was undiscovered, but at that point, there would be no one there to ask about it.
Okay. And also, if we did that, would we still have to have a 13-hour police detail?
Yes, that doesn't matter.
So, okay. So there are reasons that we don't want to do that, is my point. And if you going to the 12 to 8 or noon to 8 is probably the best option if we're going to reduce the election hours.
I think it would be, and again, it's going to be augmented by the voting by mail, either absentee or early vote.
Any of my colleagues have any comments with regards to this? All right. Now, I don't think we don't require a vote to do this, Larry. This is up to the town clerk to stipulate the election hours, correct?
Correct.
That being said, though, I would like to ask my colleagues if, for a little bit of feedback. I think it would be good if we could at least endorse the town clerk's decision to do this, just so we know that we're all kind of collectively in favor of doing this, and for the reasons he said why. So, at
Sure.
the very least, can we get maybe a positive roll call vote?
Could I have a couple of questions. I'm sorry, I was on mute at the time. Regarding, the proposal of noon to 8 instead of the split 8 to 12, 4 to 8, I think would work better, just because 8 to 12, people who want to vote like to get there before work, and typically they can't do it if it's starting at 8 o'clock. So I think noon to 8 would work well. It would take care of lunchtime, and/or people that are going into the office have time when they get home from a day of work to go to the polling stations. My other question is, I actually have this question as just a resident of Bellingham. The requirement as far as a police detail goes, where does that come from? I've always been amazed, like, how many policemen are at a polling station. I look at it as maybe too many, but I'm curious what kind of bylaws are in place that we need to have so many for a certain amount of time.
Okay, it's not a bylaw, a town bylaw. That's mandated by the state. And what they look at is each one of the ballot boxes is considered to be a polling station. So that in years past, before we had the one polling place, we had to have police detail at every single precinct. And that's still the case, even though it's under one roof, because the idea is they're supposed to guard the box so that, nobody tampers with it, nobody does anything with it. In our case, we have a couple of extra police, particularly for the state elections. We usually don't necessarily have them for the town election because it's so few people go in and out. But we have to have extra ones to make sure that, particularly when school is in session, that nobody wanders through the hallways.
Okay.
And we then have one outdoors, under the awning there, so that they can help with people that are arriving and that are handicapped, and just to keep an eye on that. So we usually have 2 extras besides the precincts.
I have a question for Larry.
Yeah.
So why don't we do away with the 5 precincts, and if not necessary, go to 2? Because
2
it seems-
precincts or 2
Yeah.
polling places?
2 precincts. We have 1 polling location, or why do we need 5?
Because there's only supposed to be X number of residents or they go by population. And so we actually have 4A and 4, which really should be joined back together, because both of them are very underpopulated. But, hopefully in 2020, the census will be such that they will see our way about it and not keep it split up. But right now, they're all supposed to have an equal number, and it has to do with, and I don't know the exact formula, but it has to do with the congressional districts.
Well, we got to get around the 6 or 7 police officers. That's just obscene.
It is. It's a lot. But again, we had them before too. They just weren't in all in one place.
Oh, I agree with that part.
All right, Cindy, you have something? I thought you raised.
You're on mute, Cindy.
Okay, let's try that again. Hi, Larry. Question for you. So I'm assuming we're switching the hours because there isn't a high percentage of people that come in the morning. I always thought that was one of our busier times, no?
And during some elections, it is a busier time. And it's just from observation, it's right at 7 until about 7:20. and then it dies off. And then for the morning, you get a lot of the seniors come to vote. But I'm not sure what the question is. The reason that I'm trying to cut back on the hours is so that we can, first of all, save some money. Because the one thing is, somebody mentioned covering lunch hour, and I didn't bring that up either. As you guys know, we provide 3 meals a day for the poll workers, which, does add up. And I tried to cut back a little bit on that and so on and so forth. So if we vote noon to 8, it will also only be 1 meal. So that'd be good too. But it's not because of where the voting actually is and how many people vote at a particular time. This was because we have the opportunity, since we have it in our bylaws, and the state is they're saying as few as 4 hours. So I thought it would be a good time for us to go 8 hours.
No, I'm not disagreeing with that, Larry. I just feel like, we have historically such a low turnout anyway. I'd hate to miss out on, whatever the number is that are coming. If we have 500 people that, I'm making this up, but let's say 500 people come between 7 and 7:20, you lose all those people.
No, not necessarily, because first of all, I can grant you there's not 500. But,
Probably 50.
I know, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
But no, because if they feel that way, that they're not going to be able to, if they understand now that it's going to be from noon to 8, they can vote by mail.
Okay, that's fine.
So, I mean, they have other options.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons why I want to get the warrant out as soon as possible so we can make the announcement.
And the other thing, is, like Larry mentioned, you've got a lot of the poll workers that are required to work the entire shift. And he's been getting a little bit of feel that they don't want to do it because of 13 hours of exposure potentially.
Mm-hmm.
So
Makes sense.
We're kind of,
Hey, Larry, this is Don. I have a question. Obviously the question comes with hoping this, we flatten the curve here and things start to reduce. But
Right.
in the event that this isn't the case, what are your plans for allowing the voters to enter into the building? I mean, it's going to be hard to maintain that 6 feet of social distancing. So I know we want to save money, but at the same time, there's going to be a need for police detail outside to make sure if we can't let them in, maybe 10 at a time, that we're going to have to, have someone out there to keep their social distancing, because there will be clusters of people coming in. Maybe when it first opens up, which is the new 12 is the new 7, but they're going to be clusters. So how do you anticipate, or if you put some thought into how you're going to handle that?
Well, first of all, like you said, we don't know what the situation is going to be at that point in time. We could require them that they wear masks. We could require, that obviously the poll workers wear masks. So, in that regard, we can keep the current protocol going if we need to. And also we can spread the precincts out more, so that the check-in and check-out desks and so on are farther apart. And we can set up the actual booths in a different manner. I've been looking into that.
Okay.
So that
I would suggest.
My suggestion is to think, and I'm sorry to cut you off, my suggestion is let's plan on thinking it's in June 9th is going to be just like it is today.
Yeah, right.
And
Well,
I think you should plan for that situation and back off from there.
And I think something as simple as the tape on the floor that they do in many retail establishments works perfect.
And we yes, we don't know what the 2.5 is going to do to this particular election, but we very rarely have lines of people except at first thing in the morning. And so by starting at noon, we're going to eliminate that crush in the morning of commuters. And as I said, anybody that feels uncomfortable about it can vote by mail. So, and we can encourage that if the time gets closer and we see that things have not changed, God forbid, and we can encourage that they vote by mail, so we don't have a huge influx of people at the gym.
Yeah,
But
I think
But unfortunately, the way the state set it up, we have to have the gym open. You know,
But I think that's something we can look at in 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, that depending on where we're at, we may start encouraging, through a PSA, reverse 911, and encourage people to get the absentee or mail-in ballot, if that's looking like the direction we're going to go in come June 9th.
I fully support the changes that Larry is suggesting.
As do
Anything
I.
else? All right.
Same here.
So, all right. So, like I said, we don't. This is nothing that needs to be voted on by the Board of Selectmen, but I think it would be good to just have a quick informal roll call vote for affirmation for the town clerk's decision. So, if you don't mind, Hillary, would you give us a quick roll call to affirm Larry's decision of eliminating or reducing the town election hours?
Sure. So can I have a roll call on who is Larry's
What was
hours
that?
from 12 to 8 of the town election?
Wop, 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 wop,
Something's
wop.
wrong with your microphone, Buttercup.
All right. I feel
Is
like
that
I was
Mrs.
talking to
Lockmore?
Charlie Brown's teacher.
Yeah.
Uh-uh.
Dan, you want me
Spencer's
to,
out.
Dan, you want me to take? All right, Mr. Spencer,
Yes.
Mr. Con,
No.
Mr. Martinez,
Yes.
Ms. McNulty,
Yes.
and Mr. Biaggi.
Yes, and we should go alphabetically next time.
I went around my screen to make sure I didn't miss anybody.
All right. So
Okay.
4-1 informal affirmation for the town clerk's decision with the reduction in change of election time. All right.
Thank you.
Hey, Dan, can
Thank
I
you,
ask
Larry. Yes.
Dan, this is Mary. Can I just ask a quick question?
Yep.
If Larry, I don't know if the Council on Aging's monthly newsletter has gone out yet for the month of May, but would that be something appropriate to include in their newsletter and reach out to folks in the community before they issue the next release?
Larry?
I know you're there, Larry. I hear the dogs barking.
I'm sorry. I don't know if the monthly newsletter's gone out. I'm sorry. I don't know that.
Okay.
Yes, it has gone out. May's is already out. It's posted to the website as well.
Okay.
Never mind. Thank you.
We'll just make sure we do some outreach, certainly during the 10 o'clock meeting or updates at the very least. But like I said, maybe a reverse 911 and other appropriate measures.
And maybe we can ask during Josie's 4 o'clock sort of happy hour with them on Thursdays to have
I
it
was just gonna-
mentioned.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that, Don. Is it official that, I don't know what I should say by being a participant this Thursday. Is it something that I should say this is what we're considering?
I think Josie should just say it.
Okay.
Yeah, but if she doesn't, I would bring it up. You want them to get out there to vote, so yes.
Yeah.
Larry, you prepare a statement that can be read. How's that sound?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, perfect. All right, any other new business?
I have a question. We had mentioned, I'm not sure if it was one of the 9 o'clock calls or it was the last Selectmen meeting, but talking about the phased-in approach to small businesses and such. Are we waiting for governor's directive, national directive, federal directive, or is this something that we are going to try and get creative with as a town?
So tomorrow we have the first COVID-19 economic development meeting with the ad hoc committee. So we're going to kind of discuss that stuff. The committee is comprised of myself and Cindy, as well as Board of Health member Trish Leclerc, Planning Board member Bill O'Connell, and we got a member from the VBA, Sue Ranieri. So there's 5 members on this board. We have 3 ex officios, Dennis, Jim Kupfer, and Mark, Deputy Chief Mark Poirier. So to kind of go through those things. We're going to meet initially Tuesdays at 10:30 via Zoom. They are public meetings. I'm sorry, open meetings, not public hearings. So we're looking at kind of what we're going to look to do short term, intermediate term, and long term as far as when it comes to open up the town. So, you know, Bob, if you're available at 10:30 tomorrow, join in, and we will solicit everyone's input at that point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a
Any
question.
other-
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Mark, does anyone know how many towns in the state of Massachusetts have the mandatory masks that we started today?
I do not have that number.
How do we get it? Because if we are going to have to wear mandatory masks everywhere, we might as well open up more businesses.
I was looking at an article from, I want to say it was last week. It was about 7 or 8 towns, but I know today on the legislative meeting, Blackstone's looking to do it. Uxbridge is looking to do it. Around us, Milford, I believe Medway. So it may become the norm, but I agree with you, and that's going to be something we certainly look at. If I mean, you know, there were businesses that were conducting business using the proper PPE and using these social protocols that were no longer allowed to do business, even though they were already taking this, and this is weeks ago before the mask even became protocol. So you're absolutely right. If we're going to wear masks, then there should be reasons that some businesses that aren't operating can definitely be operating.
We can work on getting that number, Michael. We can.
I think it's just a coincidence that it's towns around Milford that are playing follow the leader when the larger cities aren't doing this.
Yeah.
Anyways, I have another topic just to cover, if I can, since I'm in a mood right now. Financially speaking, I'd like to know whether we at a personal level or as a board level need to openly support the 2.5 override, because if we don't get the $1.5 million for the schools, we might as well start digging holes in the ground for next year's budget and the year after. And how are we going to handle that? Because to date, I haven't done much to overtly support it. And I'm concerned about, which is why I voted no, because when you limit the number of voting hours, you limit the number of people who can come out to vote.
I'll voice my opinion first, if you'd like.
Please.
I'm not sure 1.5 is going to be enough going forward.
Well, I think we're looking at, 1.5 for the schools. I think the town as a whole is going to be in the hole in the millions, but I think we saw that a year ago when we looked at fiscal 22.
Yeah. I think we may be looking at something a little bit larger that, well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure right now is the time to do it anyways, as far as the appetite to vote yes. I think a lot of people who may have been for it might not be for it anymore, but that's just my opinion. I'll entertain anyone else's opinion.
Having an appetite and needing it are two different things.
Well, yeah, but we don't know. The only thing that's certain is the uncertainty at this point. So I'm not sure where we're going to be as far as financially goes. We had the discussion today with Senator Fatman and Rep. Soder, and we had one last week with Mary and Dennis were on those respective calls. They don't know where the state's going to be at this point. So to kind of make decisions based on what we don't know, I mean, yeah, would it be great to say we don't need the state, we can do it on our own? Fantastic, but I'm not sure we're in that position. Don?
No, I was just going to ask Mary, what's the impact? I know that this number came up when we were talking, but what's the impact per resident for if the override is approved? Do you remember? Is it like $40 to $50 a month? I mean, a year.
Per quarter.
Per quarter. Okay.
It was about $160. So if you remember back to our original budget presentation,
Mhm.
without the override, the increase for an average single-family tax bill was about $180 for our budget without the override.
Mhm.
With the override, it was 180 plus the additional 160, so a $340 increase annually.
And that's based on a home value of what, around 300,000? Is that what the number
It,
was?
I
350 maybe?
think it was about 320.
320,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
Right,
I'd have to write that
thanks.
up. Mhm.
No, that's all I need to, I mean, Dan, I think that's just, I think we're gonna have an issue. I mean, if we have, again, we have more seniors coming out than we have younger parents with children in school, it's gonna be challenging. And with everyone's difficult economic times, nobody wants another $160 tacked onto their annual bill.
Yeah, and to address, Michael's concern with the reduction in the election hours, I think that's why we got to make, the advocates of it need to make a concerted effort to let people know that voting is going to be between 12 and 8, and if you can't make it, make sure you get an absentee or early voting ballot. I think as a town, we should obviously make that concerted effort as well, because it's a change. Most people are going to wake up at 7 o'clock and think they can go vote, and they can't. So I think it's up to us. It's up to advocates of the 2.5 initiative to make sure that those in favor know there's a change this year. Obviously, there's changes everywhere this year due to obvious conditions. But you're right. There's something different, and something we have to address.
So, Dan, do you mind if I just jump in real quick?
Please.
So let me start off by saying I don't think this is. Oh, I'm sorry, I got some feedback. I don't know that this is going to be an issue that gets resolved tonight, but as we start to think about the FY21, but also 22 and 23 budgets, the reality is that at some point, the state, our state funding is going to be affected. Right now, for FY20, we should be made whole. And I just ran numbers again, and for FY20, we look like we're going to be in decent shape between our spending freeze and our local receipts, and knowing that our state aid is going to come in at its present funding levels. What we've been told for FY21 is that the state is looking at utilizing some of their reserves, and a lot of communities at this point are level funding their Chapter 70 and unrestricted aid, but are reducing all of their other aid components. So I got some feedback today from some other communities that said back in the 2009 recession, the way that the state had approached it is that they level funded Chapter 70 and UGA, but had a 25% reduction across all other state aid components. For us, that would be the equivalent of a couple $100,000. But looking ahead, at some point, depending on what happens with the economy, we're going to see some impacts not only in state aid, but also in our local receipts. And our local receipts are made up of primarily motor excise, ambulance receipts, and at this point, building permits, which has been, had some phenomenal performance this year, but that's not going to, keep pace forever. Unless Tim's going to go out there doing 24/7 inspections and we've got construction nonstop, but the reality is that's not going to happen. If people can't buy cars, then they're not going to pay excise to the level that we've enjoyed in years past. So at this point, we're looking at probably a minimum of a 10% reduction in motor excise receipts going forward. Meals tax. We know that people are not eating at restaurants. Right now for FY20, our meals tax is about $50,000 below our target, below our benchmark. So for FY20, we're looking great, and we don't have our fourth quarter yet. But we know that it's going to take a little while for the economy to ramp up, and there's going to be some people who have some tentativeness about going back and re-engaging. So we should anticipate that we're going to see some reductions in our meals tax. Some of the RMV fees, we've already seen them drop off because the Department of Motor Vehicles is closed right now and they're not processing the volume that they used to. So we can absolutely anticipate that some of our local receipts are going to demonstrate a decline in FY21. And we hope that they will rebound quickly for 22 and 23, but it all depends on what happens with the economy in the summer and in the fall. So if the override does not pass, we are right now planning our FY21 budget with about $1,000 of excess levy capacity. Very limited to no financial flexibility with what we've been projecting. So if the override doesn't pass, we know the reality is that the school department is going to face cuts. The budget that they presented to us that has been included has some reductions. They're asking for the override in order to not have to pursue those reductions, as well as to augment some of their programs. So if the override does not pass, there will be a reality that affects both the town and the school budgets of some cuts that will be needed. Dennis, if you want to jump in, feel free. But the fact of the matter is we are going to look at some reductions. Where the stormwater, one of the big changes that we did make for FY21, if you remember, is that we were successful in converting the stormwater management to an enterprise fund and removing that capacity or that pressure on our operating budget out of our operating budget and into an enterprise fund. That saved us about $500,000 in capacity, which allowed us to grow a little bit for FY21. But those sort of creative solutions are limited going forward.
I think, Dan, once the numbers start to shake out later in May, we'll look at having another meeting, another budget workshop meeting, if you will, with the board members to go over exactly where we're at and what recommendations we might be looking at for June. And we might have to really finish up what we're doing in November if, in fact, the state doesn't come out with their final budget until July or August. So there's going to be some challenges. We've met with, as you know, you've been on those meetings with the school superintendent and the chairman of the school committee to talk about their budget and their limitations and what they're planning to do. So there are a lot of moving parts still right now. And fortunately, town meeting is June 22nd, but I'm thinking maybe our first meeting in June could very well be a budget workshop where we take a look and see if we need to make any adjustments at that point in time.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Is it unrealistic for Mary, or maybe working with Beth, to calculate what our unemployment liability is going to be if it doesn't go through relative to paying the teachers and staff that are cut?
Yeah, I mean, we've got that obviously right now for where we're at. I think we could come up with some projections, Michael, based on what the school superintendent has told us. So I think we could come up with some projections. $145,000 is what we're looking at for the liability that's out there right now. When someone goes on unemployment, we get noticed as to what the total liability is. So if all the people that are out right now stay on for the maximum amount of time, it's about $145,000. But of course, school teachers make a lot higher salary than the people that are out on unemployment right now. So those numbers will be more substantial. I think the max unemployment now is about $800 per week for an individual. So, but we can definitely get those numbers.
All right. Anything else? Hearing nothing, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
First from Mr. Martinez, second from Mr. Connor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 0. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Be safe.
Night, guys.